And welcome to Awakening Through Love, the podcast. My name's Rod Gordon.
And my name's Martina Hughes. This today is episode 4 of Who is Rod Gordon? So we'll be learning a little bit more about Rod today, his life, and what his journey to become the man he is today. Today's episode, we're focusing on a topic very close to Rod's heart, and that is being a dad. Rod has an amazing son who is now 22 years old. And we're not going to mention his name in order to protect his privacy. He is an incredible young man with a generous heart and a beautiful spirit and a great sense of adventure.
I absolutely love him.
Beautiful. So let's dive in then. At what point did you have the realization that being a dad was something that was happening in your life and it was part of your journey?
It was actually a surprise for me. Like we were told by doctors that we weren't going to be able to have kids. And so we just accepted that. Decided, okay, life's going to be about, living, indulging, traveling, doing whatever it is that we want to do. We're not going to be able to have kids. And like within 6 weeks, she got pregnant, and I was like, okay, that's clearly not happening. So now we're doing this. And so it was a bit of a surprise initially, but it was a really, really good surprise.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I know oftentimes men say that being a dad doesn't feel real to them until they hold their baby for the first time. Did you have that experience, or was it at some other point that it felt real to you?
Yeah, like when he was born, even seeing him born, that was surreal experience. And so, like, I wouldn't say I had the realization then. It was kind of a shock and an adjustment. Um, Even like for me, I remember when he was like 6 weeks old, if I was holding him and his mum walked in the room, he would immediately start to look around or to the direction of her voice, like he would recognize her. But when I walked into the room, nothing. And at that time, like I was training in martial arts, I was doing karate, and our Shihan wanted us there 5 nights a week. We had to do 5 sessions of training per week, and I worked 6 days a week and one late night. So I had like one night a week that I was home. And so he just didn't recognize me, and I had to make a choice. I was like 3 months out for going for my black belt, which I was like so excited about and trained for so many years for. And here I had a son and who just didn't even recognize me because I was not there. And I was like, oh, that's not how I want to be a dad. It's not what I want to do. And so I had a choice. I'm like, I can be in the dojo with a bunch of sweaty men punching and kicking each other, which I loved. Or I could be at home and be a dad. And it's like I had to make that decision. It's like, nah, I want to be a dad. And so once I made that decision, when he was about 6 weeks old and I was home more, he started to recognize me more. And that's when I really started to feel like a dad.
Beautiful. And did you have a sense of what sort of dad you wanted to be?
Not exactly. I knew I wanted to be an active dad, as in I wanted to participate in his life. Like I wanted to do feeds, I wanted to change nappies. Some of those weren't great. I wanted to do all those things. I wanted to be a part of like his world and what he was experiencing and experiencing him, growing up. So I didn't know exactly what kind of dad I wanted to be, but I knew that I wanted to be active.
Beautiful. And what was it like watching him go from being like a baby to a toddler? Like, how did all of that feel for you experiencing that?
Oh, it was amazing. Like watching him grow and change, like, doing his bath at night and, watching him unwind and relax and then, putting him in bed and reading him a story. Like I used to love that. And just he'd start to recognize the characters in the story and just I could watch his awareness grow and watch him learning in real time. And it was amazing to sort of be there and be a part of all of that. It was super exciting, and they grow and change so fast. Like there's so much happening, and if you're not there, you don't get to experience it. So for me, it was really important to be there.
Beautiful. And I know lifestyle is really important to you. How did lifestyle change for you with being a dad?
It just evolved. Like it just changed. But it was a welcome change too. So like you mentioned lifestyle, like for me, I chose that at 21. My dad was he's a really good dad. Like his purpose as a dad was to be a provider. And sometimes he worked 7 days a week and more than one job to do that. And he provided like an amazing life for my brother and I and my mom. And that was really beautiful. And I was really grateful for that. And I wanted to do it differently. So at 21, like I made the decision that my life was going to be about lifestyle, not about money. Like money was a part of it, and I didn't want to ignore that. I wanted to be a provider like my dad was and provide a great childhood for my son, but I also wanted to be there to experience it with him. So part of that exploration at 21 was like I was really curious about the meaning of life, and asking that question, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? Eventually the answer came, and the answer is really simple from my point of view. And for me, it still stands today. But the meaning of life is to live. How do you define living? And that's where everyone gets to do it differently.
Yeah.
And so for me, the priority in choosing lifestyle was that I want to work skillfully enough to be a good provider so that we don't go without. I was never rich or anything like that, but I did well, but I also wanted to be available to experience life with him. And so I made choices in alignment with that. So my lifestyle, it kind of just grew and expanded, very much like the things he loved were just, I think, naturally, things that I loved. I don't know if we influence our kids or direct them and then that's why they love them. I have no idea. But he seemed to naturally love the things I loved. Like I remember when he was 2 and he, I think he was actually with his grandpa, and his grandpa showed him, his grandpa had a motorbike, and his grandpa showed him the motorbike and he lost it. He was like, yeah, he just wanted to get on this motorbike.
Wow.
From like a really young age. And I was really glad that it was him that introduced him to motorbikes and not me, so that I wasn't influenced, because I'm mad keen motorbike nut. I love any kind of motorbike. And so it was good that it wasn't me that introduced him to that. It was my partner's dad, so it was even better.
Yeah. So it kind of came a little bit removed.
Yeah. It did. Yeah. And so, that became a part of our lives, which was really good because, it was something I'd let go of at that point in time. I hadn't had a motorbike for ages, but seeing his love for it, it actually reignited my love for it. It's like, oh, I forgot about this.
So how does a love of motorbikes fit into a 2-year-old's life?
Well, it fits in with him sitting on the back of the motorbike riding up the driveway, which he used to love. He insisted that we wheeled it down, ride it back up, wheel it down, ride it back up. And so also, like, quite often I would work on the motorbike, so I'd have him out there with me. And I was very much one of those dads that's like, I saw being a dad as that my role was, obviously to love him and care for him, but to create a functioning human being, to teach him how to be a human in the world, right from the word go. So he was like walking around in his nappy with screwdrivers in his hand, and like his pa and that used to lose it. And like, that's so dangerous. Like, yeah, but he's got to learn. And I'd teach him that it's sharp and all that sort of stuff. So he was careful, and he'd sit there and undo stuff on the motorbike, and we'd clean the motorbike, and we'd just do stuff on it together at that age.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so at what age was he going on bigger rides with you?
Well, it's that before that he was he actually started to learn to ride.
Mm.
He'd go out to my parents' house. And so I bought him a little like motorbike on eBay, just like a pit bike or something. It was like $400 or $500. And I was teaching him just to ride around the house. And so I'd just stand there with my hand on his back and just sort of be there. And we'd just potter around in first gear. And then my brother had kids and my parents had a farm. So we went out there one day. And so I serviced all the bikes first and changed the oil on them and did all this stuff so that they were right for the kids to go for a spin. And so the kids are getting ready to get us to get on the bike. And I said to my brother, hey, can you help my son out with getting on the bike? He's like, yeah. I said, I'm going to go in and grab a drink because it was like 20 or 30 degrees. And I was like hot as. So I went inside to get a drink and I come back outside and my son's gone. And I said to my brother, where is he? And he goes, he's gone. I'm like, he's gone where? Riding. I go, really? He can't ride yet. He goes, brother's like, yeah, he can. And he's off, following the other kids around the house. I'm like, damn, no way. So he was like a natural. And after about 30 minutes, like I went outside and I thought, he's got to have a break and stop and have a drink. And so I stand there and I go, hey, mate, stop. And he just rides past. And I'm like, that part of me that feels powerless and worthless, like anger starts to come online. I'm like, stop. Anyway, he keeps going past me. I'm like, no way. Like, I'm not, that part of me that didn't want to be ignored. I was like, unconscious and just wanting to rage because I felt powerless and worthless, like my son was ignoring me. So he comes around again the next time. And I jump in front of him and I grab the handlebars and I go, when I say stop, I fucking mean stop. And he looks at me, his eyes are like really big and bug-eyed and he goes, I don't know how to stop that. And I'm like, I said, that's a really good point, mate. Thank you. So he hadn't learned. And so like at that point, he's like, he had to be 4 or less than 4.
Wow.
Like he was young.
Wow.
And so anyway, taught him how to use the brakes and stop. I was going for Dad of the Year. But it wasn't until he was like, I reckon 11 or 12 that we started going riding. Like we rode together when he was younger before we actually went out on rides. Yeah, I reckon he was about 11 or 12.
Yeah, okay. And I know that you used to take him on rides down the Great Ocean Road. There's a story you share about that. So I'd love you to include that. Yeah,
so I was also into road bikes, dirt bikes, any kind of motorbike. And so the Great Ocean Road is this really stunning, beautiful road in Victoria that sort of runs from Torquay all the way along the coast. I don't know where they consider it that it ends, possibly Warrnambool, but maybe earlier. And every Sunday there'd be a group of guys that would ride down to this cafe in Lorne. And it was about 45 minutes from where we lived, and it was a really stunning, beautiful ride. And like some mornings there'd be up to, there was this old guy, Keith, and he used to do a bike count at 9 a.m. And he was in his 70s. He'd been riding down there since he was young. So it was like a really common thing for riders to go to this cafe. And so some mornings when he did the bike count, there was over 100 motorbikes all lined up on the street and all these guys having coffee and breakfast. And so like with his mum's permission, like I used to take him down the Great Ocean Road, like when he would have been about 7. And so he had boots and gloves and helmet and a spine protector and like a proper motor. Like I had him all in proper road bike gear. And I used to take it easy, but so we'd go down the lawn and then we'd have breakfast, and he was really confident little boy. He'd like just go up and talk to everyone. So he'd be talking to the guys about their motorbike and, hey, how was your ride? And like, he's like 7 and they're like, oh, yeah, mate, it was good. Like, it's so, he used to love it. And then on the way home though, like I used to always have like one mirror facing the road, but one mirror turned up so I could see him. And as we're riding home, I could feel him get really heavy on my back. And the kind of bike that it was a sports bike. So I was kind of laid forward and he's laid on top of me. And then I look up in the thing in the mirror and he's fast asleep. And I'm like, bloody kid, like going through this windy road. So I'm going really slow. I've got one hand wrapped around behind him on his back and he's just there and he's just like perfectly cruising along. And then his eyes pop open and he wakes up and, you know, it's like he's having micro naps. They're not like he's asleep for 15 minutes, but he's just like, I wasn't asleep, Dad. I'm like, yeah, I know, mate. Just spent the last 3 minutes terrified riding through the thing, but he was so relaxed on the back of the bike that he would just fall asleep.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and he'd insist on going further. He wanted to go down to like Wye River and there was a point that we used to go to, I can't remember what it was called, but he'd always want to go down there. And I was just like, nah, because he's going to sleep the whole way home and I just don't want to risk it.
Wow, certainly testing your edges and challenging you.
Yeah, it was, but it was really, he just loved it so much. Like sometimes I'd take him to school on the motorbike and pick him up from school on the motorbike. So it was like he loved it.
Awesome. He would have been the one with the cool dad and the motorbike.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know what they thought. It's also like, who's that fool, like, or that idiot who brings his kid to school on a motorbike? What are they thinking? Like, it's a mixed bag. You get both.
Yeah. How did you navigate knowing how important it was for you to be active and engaged? How did you navigate custody and the separation of not being with all the time?
Yeah. That was like, it was heartbreaking and it was hard. And in some ways, it's one of the best things that ever happened, like from being a dad, because I think if his mum and I hadn't have separated, I would have been one of those dads that worked really hard and ended up at work all the time and worked longer hours and provided and did all that sort of stuff, but there was absent.
Mm-hmm.
So having to separate, I had to make time to be with my son. And what that did was it also made me align to my values of lifestyle.
Mm.
And so I stopped working on Wednesdays so I could pick him up from school. I worked a short day on a Saturday so that I'd get him on a Saturday. So I'd have him Saturday, Sunday, Monday, drop him back to his mum's, and I'd have him Wednesday. So I think I had him 4 or 5 nights in the fortnight, whatever it was. So like it was a back then it was a generous arrangement. Like getting 50-50 was not something that happened back then. And I think even on the document I was allowed to have him 4 nights, but she was like a yes for 5. Do you know what I mean? So like it was like from that point of view, she was really generous and I was really fortunate to have that time with him. So it helped me to be a more active dad because I had to intentionally create space. So like every Wednesday was dedicated to him, and then every second weekend was dedicated to him. So I made sure everything was done that needed to be done, and that time I was just with him, just present with him. And that was really beautiful because I wouldn't have spent that amount of time engaged with my son if I wasn't in that situation. And so ended up being like something really beautiful. It created an experience for me of being a dad that I wouldn't have had because I didn't know to intentionally create time to just be with him, that nothing else was going to happen or nothing else mattered at that time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was really beautiful.
It sounds like the opportunity created meant that you were really present and 100% available for him when you had time together.
Exactly, yeah. And that's rare. Like that's not something that I knew to do as a dad in a relationship. And there's no reason why dads can't do that.
Yeah.
But having never seen it, I never thought to do it. It only happened because my partner at the time and I broke up. So it evolved from that, which was really, I think, one of the most beautiful things in my life was being a dad to him and having that quality of time. That was I just loved it. Yeah, like I miss it and I miss him. He's off being in the world, being a man, but yeah, I miss him and I miss being a dad and I miss the things we used to do together. Like there wasn't just the motorbikes. Like I taught him how to surf and we used to go surfing like each week, and taught him how to fish and we went camping, and like we did so much stuff together. And in some ways, like as he grew up, it was like losing a best friend. Like I loved him so much and also recognized that he needed to go out into the world and become a man. It was heartbreaking.
Mm, mm. It's such a beautiful thing that you and he share, like surfing, camping, fishing, motorbikes. That was such a strong part of him growing up. And
Yeah.
sometimes people's children don't have the same interests, but in your case, there's a beautiful mirroring there.
Yeah, there is. And like we used to travel too. Like
Mm,
if we from the age of his 7, like his mum was cool with me taking him to Bali.
mm,
And so each year, because Bali was cheap, I could afford it. Like I could do 10 days with flights and accommodation for Max and I for less than 2 grand
mm,
and stay in a kid friendly place with water slide and all that sort of stuff for the
mm,
kids because you got to manage their energy levels because they get tired. So you want somewhere that they can still be active but not overstimulated and
mm,
managing it. But like traveling together, like it turns out like he loves to travel,
mm,
and that was an amazing experience to have together.
mm.
It was a lot of fun, and sometimes it was fun for my mates because they had him as their wingman.
And how does that look, at having a young boy as a wingman?
It looks like we go to the beach and my mates go, "You go out for a surf, we'll watch your son." And I'm like, and he's like, "Yeah, go on, Dad, you go out." And I'm like, "All right." So we're at Kuta Beach and I go out and I come back in and he's sitting there talking to 2 girls in bikinis. And I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, "Oh, we asked to go up and talk to those 2 girls." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "They were just having fun." But it was yeah, it was really interesting. He loved it because he was so social. He was like, and it was so innocent. He's like, "Hi, yeah, my dad's 2 friends over there said to come up and say hi to you." And they're like, "Oh, really?" Did they? Like they knew what was going on straight away. So it was very playful and fun, and they ended up having a great time like together. But like nothing came of it from that point of view. But it was a great day at the beach.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's funny. And I guess that's one of the first things I noticed about him when I met him. Like he was 14 and so confident and sociable and communicate and connect so easily, which from everything I'd heard of teenage boys, I hadn't been around teenage boys at that stage. That sense of, friends were like, oh, teenage boys, they never talk and they're antisocial and they're always in their bedrooms. Whereas my experience of him is that he was always up for a chat.
Yep. I think he gets a good dose of that from his mum and from me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, he's always been confident socially.
Mm,
Yeah.
really, really beautiful to meet a young man, or he was still a boy then, but having that capacity around communication. One of the things I remember is being in the car with him one day. He was maybe like 15 at this stage, and the start of our relationship had been a little bit bumpy, as in Rod and I. And Rod's son says to me while I'm driving somewhere, and he's going, "So I know you and Dad got together, and then you weren't together, and then you're back together. So what really happened?" and then that's not even the best part. Then he goes, "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but if you do want to talk about it." And I was like, "That's a great question, and thank you for giving me the option to not talk. I'm happy to talk about it. Just give me a second to reflect." And I just so appreciated the maturity of him being able to say, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
at 15, to have the maturity to give me an out if I didn't want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And it made it so beautiful to then step into that conversation with him. Incredible level of skill and maturity and capacity to connect.
Yeah. And he's an amazing human. So
Mm.
it's just yeah, awesome being a dad.
Yeah, beautiful. One of the things I first remember about you from when we were getting to know each other was actually something you shared in a conversation, was about going to his first party. And I remember you sharing about a conversation you had with us at the time of how vulnerable you felt about letting him go to a party.
Mm.
So, what I loved and appreciated about it, I've said his name.
Keep going.
Okay. Um, what I loved and appreciated about it was the way in which you shared with him how vulnerable it felt for
Mm.
you to let him go to a party.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Like he'd been given permission by his mom to go, and I think I don't know if there was alcohol involved or stuff like that, but I remember feeling like a no for it in my
Mm,
body. Like I wasn't comfortable with where he was going and the people that were there, and there was also nothing I could do about it.
mm,
And so I knew that, and I wasn't going to get into a power struggle around parenting. It's like if he's been given permission by his mom, then I also trust that.
mm,
Trust that, okay, well, she's also got his best interests at heart, even though it's not what I want and I'm not comfortable with it. So I just sat down with him and just said, look, for me personally, I'm a no for this. I'm concerned about this. I feel scared about that. I'm scared about, alcohol or drugs or people spiking your drinks. I'm scared about consent. Like you need to be really careful and generous around young women and honoring how they feel. Like we hadn't had a lot of those conversations. So I said, I just felt really vulnerable about him going because I didn't want him to get hurt or to have a bad experience like being out, and to for him to be aware enough to be safe and to be confident and trust his gut. Like I would always get him to feel into his body and go, is your body a yes for this, is your body a no for that? And so he was really good at that. So I just reminded him, like, if someone suggests something or wants to do something, check in with your body. Is your body a yes for that experience or is it a no? And have the confidence to say no.
mm.
Own your no if you need to. And so, yeah, we had that conversation. He listened to what I had to say and then was keen to go to the party.
Beautiful.
But he
But
was fine. Like he
yeah.
navigated it really well. And I can't remember what the situations were, but there were things that came up for him. And he did say no. And he did
Mm,
look after some women that he thought were in positions that weren't as safe as what they could be. So
mm,
he was really good.
beautiful, beautiful, and just so beautiful as a parent that you could bring your vulnerability to the situation rather than being controlling about it, which is often a bit of a default mode as a parent when the protective part rises.
Yeah, so much of being like a separated parent. There's so many times where for me where I felt powerless
Mm,
in that dynamic, and so there was a level of acceptance of that which really served me as a dad
mm,
because I could just let go and go because I'd done it so many times. It wasn't comfortable or easy, but
mm,
I'd done it, and it was like, okay, so this is what's happening, and so I would just tell him how I felt,
yeah.
tell him that I was scared, that where I was vulnerable, tell him where I felt powerless, like have those conversations with him, not just so that he knows how I feel, but to show him that it's okay to feel as a man, but also to be vulnerable and that it's okay to speak those things out and to
Mm,
have those conversations and to say when we don't feel strong or
mm,
when I'm scared or if I'm vulnerable or whatever, to show him that part of me so it's modeling for his nervous system how to be that or do that. Like
mm,
for me, one of the things I recognized when he was really young was that kids learn or possibly more from what I'm doing and how I'm being rather than what I'm saying.
mm,
And so it was really important for me to be rather than just sort of say.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I know that part of the other lesson or guidance you gave him was around how to do things around the house and cooking and taking care of things. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, when he was like, I reckon he was at school. So he must have been, I reckon, 8 years old. And so I just like, we decided he was going to have pocket money. I can't remember how that came about, but he also had to do stuff around the house. And so back then it was like $5 a week. And the deal was that he had to save half, and that was his savings. And the other half was his spending savings. So he was allowed to spend that on whatever he wanted. But the other part he had to save, because I wanted to teach him how to save, how to enjoy spending, and to recognize the challenges and the difficulty sometimes in acquiring money, and the time that it takes to actually acquire things. And so he had these lists of chores. So I'm teaching him how to use the washing machine and the dishwasher, how to cut up veggies, even from really young. Like I had him using a knife, like he'd be up on his thing and he'd have a knife. I was just like, I'd heard that they do that at Montessori, and I thought, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Teach kids like the reality of the world. Like knives are sharp and they hurt. You got to be really careful. And so he had to, like, he came to me and said, Dad, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I don't want to do it either. He goes, why do I? She goes, my friends don't have to do this. And I go, yeah, I know. But my responsibility as your dad is not just to love you and make your life cushy and comfortable. It's to teach you how to be a functioning human. Because I know when I left home at 21, I thought I was hot shit. And I got out and I was not. I struggled. It was really hard. I thought I was going to have all this freedom and I was out of home and I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like working 2 jobs, trying to pay rent, trying to pay the bills, got to cook food. I was so exhausted when I had free time. I didn't do anything. I was like, life sucked. And I thought it took me years to get really competent at creating a routine of being capable and independent and to be a whole man that was functioning. And that's possibly still happening. But my goal for him was to not have that devastating transition that when he leaves home, it's the same as being at home, that he knows how to clean, he knows how to vacuum, he can wash clothes, he can wash dishes, he can cook. And he really loved cooking. And so what I had to do was, instead of like trying to allow 30 minutes to cook dinner, I had to allow about an hour and a half to 2 hours and let him cut up the veggies and let him cut up bits and pieces and put stuff in the pan and get burnt by the oil. Just let him have all the experiences of cooking and just slow everything down so that he could be a part of it. And he ended up loving cooking, so much so that when he was 12, he was like, Dad, can I go and do the Jamie Oliver cooking course? It was a cooking course. Chef in that town that we lived in. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. So I think he went for like 13 weeks and he was cooking the most amazing dishes, and he can still cook amazing dishes to this day. And so, yeah, teaching him to be a functioning human was a large part of what I saw my role as the dad. It's like, how can you be a skillful man in the world? And how do I bring that, as well as how do we have fun and play and work?
Feels like a really beautiful dynamic of that fun and play and connection, and also really teaching him some valuable lessons about life.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to do was keep it real. In some ways, like, my childhood felt like a fantasy. Mum and Dad did such a good job of providing an amazing childhood. It was also devoid of responsibilities in a lot of ways. And not devoid, but we were blessed with a lot of opportunity to play. But in reality, in real life, that's not how it is. And you can have a certain amount of that, but not just all the time. And so I wanted to give him a grounding, like a foundation that would allow him to thrive in all those domains, and to be able to play and to be able to work, to be able to have fun, to enjoy himself.
Yeah, wonderful. And when it came time for him being more independent, How has that felt for you? I know you said before you miss being a dad in
Yeah.
terms of being in his life every day. How does it feel knowing that he's out in the world doing his own thing now?
It feels good. Like, that's where he needs to be. If
Yeah.
he was a young man under my wing still, it, it, he wouldn't be happy.
Mm.
I would love him to be closer. Like, I moved away, and mind you, he's working all over the place now. But where we could, go for a surf or a ride or catch up or do something every now and again, that'd be awesome. But it's not the case. So
Mm.
it hurts and it's sad being so far away from him. But if he's living the life that he wants and he's happy, then I feel good about that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
like I think he works too much.
Yes.
And I think I would try to, if I could encourage him to do anything right now, it would be to work a bit less. But he's got to find that balance for himself.
Mm.
But transitioning, like, from being an active dad to him becoming an adult was also really bumpy, because it was around the time I had my accident.
Yeah.
And so I had my accident in May 28th, 2018 at 6:26 p.m. I'm just trying to work out how old he was in 2018. He must have been 16, 17.
Almost 17, yeah.
Yeah, and so, he was learning to drive. He was working full time by then. He'd left school, so it was kind of like ripped away, because I couldn't drive. Because I had a spinal and brain injury, they took my license off me. I had to go get past the test to get it back again, because my arms and legs weren't working properly. So I had to have a special driver education. In that period, like, that whole being a dad got ripped away, and he really couldn't, stay at our place as the way that he was. And so then he was more with his mom, but then he was working 5 or 6 days a week. So it kind of felt like it was ripped away rather than it was a transition, if that makes sense. And, he lost his dad in that moment too, the dad that he had. Like, I'm not sure what his experience is. We've never spoken about that, but it might be an interesting conversation to have, actually. But, his dad, how he knew it, this competent, capable man that used to go and do all this stuff with him and could handle anything, was all of a sudden just like grounded, literally just like pummeled. And so, there wasn't really a transition for us. And it's probably a conversation that we should have. But I know for me, it just felt like he was, ripped away from me. And so, like, not ripped away from me, but it was like that experience in our lives was just like whew, pulled out like a plant. It was just like gone. And so, and it was at the time where he was like, we were spending less and less time together anyway. Like, once he started working around 15, we stopped riding because he was physically exhausted from his job. All right, we're back from a quick pause. Challenges of podcasting from home. Garbage truck day. We don't normally podcast on this day.
So, yeah, it feels like it's quite raw for you, the way that transition happened into not being a dad in the way you were.
Absolutely. Yeah, it felt violent. It was so quick, but I lost everything in my life at that time too. So, like, I lost my career as a hairdresser, the motorbike riding, surfing, my friends that I did all those things with. I didn't lose their friendship, still friends with them today, but everything changed when, the things we did together I could no longer do. And it was the same with us. So, yeah, if I couldn't be a dad in the same way, then it was just, things changed really violently and quickly.
Yeah. And I imagine there would have been that vulnerability for him as well, of seeing you no longer that kind of, larger than life character that you were.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I actually can't imagine what his experience was like. And I don't know, he's never spoken about it. So, but I am curious about it. Like, I'd have the conversation, but I also wouldn't want to press him to have that conversation either.
Yeah. And I guess also around that time, he started having girlfriends and, exploring that side of life. So does it feel like with the things you've learnt and journeyed in relationships that you've been able to pass some of your wisdom and understanding on to him?
Definitely at times, yeah. But I wait until he asks a question
Mm.
and is curious. I don't want to press my values or beliefs or understandings onto him.
Mm.
I want to allow him to find his way.
Yeah.
And so when he's had challenges or things come up, I've supported him in those. And yeah, he doesn't often ask, but he's always really happy when we have a conversation.
Yeah, beautiful. So, for anybody out there who is currently, like any men who are currently dads to young children, do you have any suggestions that you'd offer them? Like, given how valuable and rich your experience of being a dad has been, what would you say to other dads?
That's a good question. Like, again, like I wouldn't want to force my values onto someone. Like
Mm.
some other men might have totally different values and they want to work all the time and provide, university and all these types of things. And yeah, like for me, I guess I would say like if you can, I think the greatest gift we can give our kids is our presence
Mm.
and our time. It's not the things; it's the time together. It's so obvious when you buy kids a present and they play with the box. It's like I saw that happen so many times. It's like, literally going to get this kid a box. Just a box.
So, kind of the same as cats.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah. And so, but taking the time to enjoy those things to me adds value to the quality of family time and family life and allows it to have a deeper meaning.
Mm.
And that deeper experience for me has been really rich and really valuable. And so creating quality connection, with their kids is what I'd recommend, and with their intimate partner, and allowing time for both of those. Because if we don't invest time and energy and attention into those things, they don't thrive. They suffer. And so, yeah, I would say put time into both of those and the quality of your life will expand exponentially in all areas.
Beautiful, beautiful. I so love hearing you talk about being a dad and
Really?
and your journey with him. It's so precious because there's so much feeling and love and wisdom in the way that you've been a dad. So
Yeah, right. I
thank
feel like I'm just talking about my favorite topic. It just feels totally normal.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that experience with me, but also for our listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to say about being a dad before we finish?
I love it. And I miss being an active dad. I would love to have my son around and do stuff with him, and I miss that.
Mm.
That's the deepest truth.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your love, and thank you all for listening. And we will see you for another episode next week where we'll dive a little bit more into our relationship.
Oh, exciting. Thank you.